She's stronger and better for you. The sentence struck Audrey like a cold wind in mid-June, stopping her dead outside the kitchen door. Her fingers still clutched 2 flutes of champagne, condensation wetting her palms. The laughter and music from the backyard graduation party felt suddenly distant, muffled under the weight of her mother's voice. Inside, Margaret stood near the sink, composed in her signature navy dress, speaking with the same calm she used to critique flower arrangements or passive-aggressively suggest a better career path. Across from her, Mark held 2 drinks, one clearly hers, and wore that half-apologetic, half-helpless expression Audrey had come to know too well. Vanessa's driven, Margaret said, as if listing nutritional facts. She makes partner next quarter. She's prepared for real partnership in life and law. Audrey, well, she still draws birds in coffee foam. Audrey's throat tightened. She pressed herself against the wall, the edge of a framed family photo pressing into her shoulder. She told herself to walk away, but she stayed. I know, Mark replied softly, eyes darting to the floor. But I've been with Audrey for 3 years. I care about her. Margaret smiled, elegant, predatory. Caring isn't enough. Not when you want a life built on something solid. Vanessa will push you, Audrey. She'll always choose dreams over direction. Mark didn't argue. Audrey's heart fractured in real time. The silence from him hurt more than the words from her mother. She wanted him to laugh, to say, "That's ridiculous." Instead, he simply nodded, just slightly, but enough. I've always thought you two had more chemistry, Margaret added, placing a hand lightly on Mark's arm. She's noticed you for years. Audrey couldn't breathe. She stepped back, unnoticed, retreating down the hall like a ghost in her own life. The champagne flutes trembled in her hands, tiny rivers tracing along her wrists. She placed them on a side table before they fell, fingers cold and numb. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting golden light over family and guests celebrating Vanessa's graduation. Audrey walked among them, smiling where appropriate, answering small talk with automatic warmth, all while her insides collapsed. Jamie raised an eyebrow as Audrey passed. You okay? Audrey nodded. Just warm, needed some air. She didn't speak of it that night. Not the conversation, not the nod, not the casual betrayal blooming behind closed doors. That was her first mistake. Over the following weeks, changes crept in like fog. Mark began mentioning Vanessa in benign anecdotes. Vanessa crushed her oral argument today. Or, she's doing this new interval training, looks intense. Each comment was a needle, sharp, small, almost ignorable. Then came the subtle shifts. Postponed date nights, new priorities, the way his phone tilted slightly away during conversations. Once, Audrey found a receipt for a cafe she'd never been to, time-stamped during a lunch break he'd said was packed with meetings. When confronted, he dismissed it. We ran into each other. Vanessa was downtown. The words came with a look, a patient, reasonable look that made Audrey doubt herself. Maybe she was being sensitive. She began studying them at dinners, watching how their eyes met. Once they both laughed at a joke no one else heard. Jamie said it first. He doesn't look at you the same way. Audrey forced a smile. Everyone goes through patches. But one patch bled into the next. 3 months after that kitchen moment, Audrey showed up at Mark's apartment unannounced, tickets in hand for a concert he once claimed as his favorite. Her key still worked. She still thought it meant something. Inside, silence. Until she saw it. The blouse. Vanessa's unmistakably expensive, carelessly crumpled near the hallway. A path of clothing led to the bedroom. Audrey froze, the concert envelope falling from her fingers. It opened midair, paper fluttering across the floor like petals no one asked for. From behind the door, muffled laughter, a voice low and masculine, a sigh. Audrey didn't knock, didn't scream. She simply left. Audrey stood in the hallway, torn between rage and resolve, and chose silence. I'm not running away, Audrey corrected, her voice quiet but unwavering. I'm moving forward. Jamie didn't respond right away. She stood with her arms crossed, watching as Audrey folded the last of her clothes into a soft, worn duffel. Outside, thunder rolled low in the Philadelphia sky, the kind of summer storm that felt more like a warning than relief. The apartment smelled like cardboard and resolve. Audrey had left the framed sketches on the wall, the charcoal swan her professor once praised, the minimalist skyline she'd drawn for Mark on their anniversary. None of it came with her. On the kitchen counter sat 3 envelopes, each labeled with deliberate strokes: Mom, Mark, Vanessa. Inside, nothing dramatic, no lists of wrongs, no cries for closure, just a single sentence in each: watch me thrive. She'd considered something longer, something that explained what they had broken, but realized they wouldn't hear it even if she screamed. Better then to leave silence where their voices had once filled the space. Jamie sighed, pushing off the door frame. You sure you don't want to crash at my place a few days? Just to cool off? I love you for offering, Audrey said, lifting the duffel. But if I don't do this now, I never will. The hallway echoed with her footsteps. Each door she passed felt like a version of herself she was shedding. Versions that had waited too long for apologies, for someone to say she mattered just as she was. The drive started dry, just humid summer air and fading light. But halfway out of the city, the clouds broke open like grief. Rain lashed the windshield as she guided the car north, then west, then finally toward Chicago. The GPS glowed faintly on the dashboard. Her heart thudded in tandem with the wipers, steady, determined. 12 hours later, she pulled into a run-down motel on the outskirts of the city. The neon sign buzzed, half-lit. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something older beneath it. The walls were beige and too close. She dropped the duffel near the bed and sat on its edge, soaking in her new nowhere. Audrey allowed herself 5 minutes to cry. She set a timer. She pressed her hands to her face. Let the ache shake out of her. Let the thunder inside her chest settle into something like stillness. When the timer chimed, she wiped her cheeks, exhaled, and opened her laptop. The internet connection was slow, but functional. She typed Studio Apartment Chicago Cheap into the search bar, then opened a second tab. Entry-level creative jobs Chicago. A third, cafes hiring artists. The next 3 days blurred into a routine of rejection and small hope. She visited 12 apartments. One had mushrooms growing in the bathroom. Another smelled like cat pee. The 12th had peeling paint and a broken elevator. But the window faced west, and the floorboards didn't creak. She signed the lease before anyone else could. The kitchen held a miniature fridge and 3 mismatched drawers. Audrey added magnets shaped like pizza slices to the empty metal surface and pinned job listings beneath them like declarations of war. You have 30 days, she told her reflection in the cracked mirror. Rent or retreat. Jamie mailed her a care package, snacks, a handwritten note, and a silver bracelet etched with WMT. Audrey smiled when she read the tiny engraving. Watch me thrive. It felt like armor. On day 28, Audrey walked into Meridian Investment Group for what she silently called her last shot. She wore her best dress, the dark green one she used to save for gallery nights. The receptionist barely looked up before motioning her to sit. In the waiting area, another candidate sat flipping through a glossy resume, designer bag, stiff posture, confident. Audrey stared at her own hands, folded in her lap. A tall woman with sleek hair and glasses approached. Ms. Davis, Carol from HR. There's been a slight change. Here it comes, Audrey thought. The administrative role was filled internally, Carol continued. But Mr. Reynolds wondered if you'd consider interviewing for something else. Executive assistant to a junior associate. She blinked. Sure, she said. Flexible's kind of my thing these days. They walked through glass corridors and cubicles that looked like modern mazes. Audrey followed Carol to a corner desk piled with papers, coffee cups, and a small potted succulent hanging on for dear life. A man looked up, rumpled shirt sleeves, dark circles, intelligent eyes. Patrick Reynolds, he said, standing to shake her hand. Sorry about the mess. I think the plant's dead, but I water it just in case. Audrey smiled. Audrey Davis. I'm not afraid of clutter or caffeine. Something softened in his posture. Honest. I like that. He gestured to a chair. Tell me why an art major from Philly wants to work here. Audrey could have lied. Could have said she wanted stability, benefits, corporate experience. But something inside her was tired of pretending. Because starting over sometimes means burning the map of your old life, she said. He paused, then nodded, slow. I've been there. Outside, the rain began again, gentler this time, like the storm was shifting. Inside, something else began too. The receptionist called her name. Audrey stood up, heart pounding, into the unknown. Because starting over sometimes requires burning the map of your old life. Patrick didn't reply right away. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes skimming Audrey's resume one more time. The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile, but something thoughtful. "Well," he said at last, gesturing toward the organized chaos surrounding him, "I hope you brought a lighter." Audrey blinked, surprised. Then she laughed. It was the first genuine laugh that had left her lips in weeks. He offered her the job on the spot. No second interview, no corporate pretense. "You'll start tomorrow," he said. "If you're still willing after seeing all this," he added, motioning to the leaning towers of documents and forgotten lunches. "I'm flexible," Audrey replied, "and mildly excellent at making order out of mess." Patrick nodded once. "That's exactly what I need." Her first day began with lukewarm coffee and a jammed printer. Audrey arrived early, only to discover Patrick already hunched over spreadsheets with a half-eaten granola bar and 3 cups of coffee in various states of decay. He looked up with bleary eyes and said, "Don't let the caffeine fool you. I'm only semi-functional before 10. She learned quickly that the job required more than calendars and emails. Patrick was the kind of person whose brain moved faster than his filing system. One moment he was planning an investor meeting. The next he was scribbling portfolio ideas on the back of a Thai food menu. Audrey adapted. She brought her own system, folders, color-coded sticky notes, digital backups. She added labels to his chaos, redirected 3 conflicting appointments in his calendar, and introduced a red folder rule. Anything urgent went into the red folder on his desk. Patrick grumbled at first, then stopped forgetting things. Over lunch breaks, she sat by the window in the hallway with her sketchbook. Not drawing, not yet. Just remembering what it felt like to hold a pencil and not be afraid of blank space. Occasionally, Patrick would pass and peek over her shoulder. "You sketch?" "Used to," she'd say. "You should keep going." He never pushed, only nodded. One evening, after most of the office had cleared out, Audrey stayed behind to finish organizing a new client file. She'd just restacked a messy pile when she accidentally knocked over a cup of coffee, Patrick's naturally, onto a binder marked Q3 forecast. Panic surged. She grabbed napkins, blotted desperately, heart racing. Her hands shook. Patrick reappeared moments later, watching her from the doorway. "I'm so sorry," she blurted, barely meeting his eyes. "I should have been more careful." He walked over, took the binder, flipped through a few soggy pages, and said calmly, "It's just paper. The data's backed up. You okay?" Audrey froze, stunned by the lack of reprimand. He crouched beside her and handed her a clean napkin. "You're doing great, Davis. Take a breath." No lecture, no disappointment, just kindness. Later that week, he texted her by mistake. A message clearly meant for someone else. "That date was a disaster. I'd rather talk to Davis about mutual funds." She didn't bring it up. The next day, he showed up with her favorite tea. She hadn't told him it was her favorite. Lunches became less formal. He dragged her to food trucks on Fridays, insisted she try spicy noodles he claimed were life-changing. They talked about everything but work. His obsession with vintage motorcycles, her love for old train stations. He never pried into her past, only listened when she offered pieces. "You're a mystery, Davis," he said once over a shared banh mi. "Most people love talking about themselves. You deflect." "Most people have stories worth sharing," she said quietly. He didn't argue. As weeks passed, the rhythm between them sharpened. He began asking for her input in meetings. She started anticipating his needs before he voiced them. Their shared whiteboard became a tapestry of color-coded notes and inside jokes. Once she caught him staring at her hands, ink stained from correcting a draft, and instead of looking away, he said, "You make my work better." She didn't know what to say to that. He didn't expect an answer. That night, as she walked back to her tiny apartment in uptown Chicago, the bracelet on her wrist caught the city lights. WMT glinted faintly beneath her coat sleeve. She whispered it aloud. "Watch me thrive." "You're a mystery, Davis," he said, "but I think I'm starting to get it." The office was quieter than usual, lit only by Patrick's desk lamp and the flickering glow of the city outside. Empty takeout containers formed a modest fortress around his laptop. Audrey sat across from him, reorganizing printed reports by risk profile. her fingers moving almost automatically. It was late November, just days after Thanksgiving. Most of the building had emptied by 6. Now it was almost 11. Patrick leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You know," he said slowly, "I've been developing something for years. A plan. A real one. Just didn't have the guts to say it out loud until now." Audrey raised an eyebrow, glancing up. "Please tell me it involves fewer coffee cups and more sleep." He chuckled. "Depends how you feel about starting something from scratch." She paused, a file still open in her lap. "You're serious? Serious enough to already have a name, a mission, some very basic branding." He slid a slim folder across the desk labeled Reynolds Capital Concept Deck. Inside were pages of notes, design drafts, and a short manifesto. Sustainable investment. Community first growth. Ethical returns. Bold ideas deserve backing. "I want to build this," he said, "a boutique firm focused on sustainability and founders who don't get the spotlight. First-generation entrepreneurs, family-run shops, women-owned businesses. People like—" He stopped. "People like you." Audrey closed the folder slowly. "You're leaving Meridian." He nodded. "By the end of the quarter." Silence stretched between them, filled with hums from old computers and the distant buzz of an elevator returning to ground floor. "I want you to come with me," Patrick continued. "Not as my assistant, as my partner, operations manager. You already do half the work, might as well get a title and a stake." Audrey blinked, her throat tightened. Images flooded her. Margaret saying she wasn't built to lead, Vanessa in courtroom victories. Mark nodding silently as her mother erased her. The ring of those words, "You're the soft one," the dreamer, still echoed in her bones. "I'm flattered," she said finally, "but also underqualified. I don't have a business degree. I still Google acronyms you throw around." Patrick tilted his head. "You know what I see? Someone who rebuilt an entire system in 3 months, who translates chaos into clarity without losing her soul in the process." She looked down at her hands, at the bracelet Jamie had given her. WMT still shining. "I'd be taking a risk," she whispered. "So would I." His voice softened. "But if I'm going to risk something this big, I want to build it with someone I trust." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she opened her phone and tapped a contact. Jamie. On speaker, Jamie answered with a yawn. "If this is a Chicago pizza debate again, I'm hanging up." Audrey smiled. "He offered me partnership, a real one." Jamie paused, then warmly, "This is your mountain, Aud. Climb it." Audrey set the phone down. Her heartbeat slowed into something steady. She looked at Patrick. "I'm in," she said, "but only if we build it clean, ethical, no cut corners, no suits over soul." He smiled, fuller now. "Deal." He pulled out 2 folders. One said Founder, P. Reynolds, the other, Founder, A. Davis. They toasted with cold coffee. Later that night, Audrey lay in bed sketching logo concepts. One was shaped like a seedling breaking through concrete. Another was a star tucked into the branches of a tree. In the morning, she'd show him both. "Then let's build something no one sees coming," she whispered. "Maybe it's time they saw who you've become." Patrick said it gently, sliding a stack of acquisition documents across their shared dining table. The morning light filtered through half-open blinds, casting soft stripes across Audrey's fingers as she turned the page. Her breath caught when she saw the name. Mark Thompson, Compliance Officer, Meridian Investment Group. And below it, in the legal annex, Vanessa Davis, External Legal Counsel. Audrey blinked, willing her heart to stay still. "I didn't know they were involved," Patrick continued. "At least, not until the due diligence phase. If it's too much, if you want me to pull back, I will." She set the papers down and looked at him. "No," she said. "It's just strange, like seeing a ghost in broad daylight." He waited. "I don't want to run from it," she added. "Not anymore." Later that night, Audrey sat by the window of their apartment, flipping through a faded sketchbook. Tucked into its pages was a postcard-sized print from her first art show, the one her family never attended. On the back, her handwriting in silver ink. "Hope you can make it." No one ever responded. She held it a moment, then tucked it into the recycling bin without ceremony. The next morning, while they finalized the gala plans, a yearly tradition for their firm, Patrick brought it up again. "We usually focus on investors and partners, but this time we could invite the full Meridian team. Everyone, even the Philadelphia contingent. Audrey stared at him. It would be a statement, he said. Not revenge, just visibility, transparency. She took a long breath. You really think they'll come? They might, he said, but this isn't about them. She agreed. The theme for the gala was already set, regenerative growth. Fitting, Audrey thought. They booked the Natural History Museum's grand atrium, high ceilings, dramatic columns, the gentle hum of Chicago's January snowstorms just beyond the tall windows. Jazz quartet, recycled paper invitations printed with soy-based ink, locally sourced menu. Everything reflected who they were, what they'd built. Patrick handled most of the logistics. Audrey focused on the guest list. When it came time to address the envelopes for Margaret, Vanessa, and Mark, she hesitated. She didn't want to write the same hollow words she had once sent before. Instead, she penned by hand. Looking forward to showing you the life I've built. Audrey Reynolds. She sealed the envelopes and mailed them herself. Weeks passed. The RSVPs arrived gradually. Colleagues, investors, even Jamie, who included a photo of her boarding pass and a sticky note, bracelet still on. Then came the email from Meridian's Philadelphia office. Mark would attend in his official capacity. Vanessa would accompany him. Margaret responded in a crisp cream envelope with barely 2 sentences. Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to reconnecting. M. Davis. Audrey held the letter in her hand for several minutes before setting it aside. That night, she took her emerald green gown from the back of the closet, still wrapped in dry cleaner's plastic. She had bought it for an event she never attended, back when she still thought success needed permission. Now she would wear it without apology. On the evening before the gala, Audrey rehearsed polite greetings in the mirror. Imagined her mother's voice, Vanessa's expression, Mark's eyes. Patrick found her in the bedroom, one sock on, staring at her reflection. Nervous? He asked. Not really, she said. Just remembering? He walked up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and looked at her in the mirror. This time you're not proving anything, he said. You're just being seen. Audrey reached for the simple diamond pendant he'd given her on their 5th anniversary. It gleamed softly under the lights. You chose this life, he said. No one gave it to you. She turned toward him and nodded. Then it's time they see who I really am. This time, I'm not the one being evaluated. This is our world now. They're just visiting. Patrick adjusted his bow tie in the reflection of the museum's lobby mirror as Audrey fastened the clasp of her pendant. Outside, the first snow of the new year fell in quiet spirals, dusting the sidewalk like powdered sugar. Inside, soft jazz echoed through the vaulted atrium of the Natural History Museum, where glass displays and marble columns shimmered under warm lighting. Audrey smoothed the emerald fabric of her gown, its hue mirroring the energy she carried tonight, rooted, rich, alive. You ready? Patrick asked, offering his arm. She took it without hesitation. I've never been more. Guests arrived in clusters, investors in velvet coats, partners in tailored suits, familiar smiles from clients who had watched Reynolds Capital grow from coffee-stained pitch decks to a respected name. Audrey moved among them with practiced ease. She answered questions, shared laughs, paused for photos near the floral centerpiece of native prairie blooms, and recycled glass. Every detail of the night, down to the bamboo utensils, reflected the values she and Patrick had woven into their company. Then near the entrance she saw them. Margaret, elegant in navy, her silver brooch catching the chandelier light. Vanessa, poised as always, hair swept into a severe bun. And Mark, older, slightly heavier, in a conservative gray suit that seemed one size too stiff. For a moment, they stood just inside the threshold, eyes scanning the room. Audrey didn't move. She didn't need to. Let them find me. Eventually they did. Darling, Margaret said first, stepping forward with arms outstretched, and that polished social smile she wore like pearls. You look stunning. Audrey accepted the air kiss with grace. Thank you. I'm glad you could make it. Patrick stepped in beside her. Good evening, Patrick Reynolds, Audrey's husband, co-founder. Vanessa extended her hand. Of course, I followed your firm's growth with interest. All due respect, Patrick replied smoothly. But Audrey's operational mind is the reason we made it past year 1. Audrey caught the subtle flicker of surprise in Vanessa's expression, something between reassessment and reluctant admiration. Mark stayed quiet. When their eyes met, his gaze dropped first. "Mark Thompson," he said, as if she didn't know. "Compliance officer, Meridian." Patrick offered a diplomatic nod. "Welcome to the family of companies." Mark's mouth opened, then shut. He nodded again, looking smaller than she remembered. Dinner passed in curated elegance. Audrey gave no speeches. Patrick led the formal toast, honoring their team, their mission, and their new partnerships, including Meridian. There was no boast, no pointed references. But when Patrick spoke her name, none of this exists without Audrey Reynolds. The spotlight shifted, eyes turned. Even Margaret's. After the toast, Margaret approached her at the dessert table. "You've done well for yourself," she said, sipping champagne. "I always knew you had potential." Audrey smiled, slow and steady. "Did you? I remember you saying otherwise." Margaret waved a hand. "A mother pushes. You needed fire. Vanessa needed confidence. You've both succeeded." "No," Audrey said gently. "I found success when I stopped needing your definition of it." Margaret faltered, just a beat. "Well, in any case, I suppose I should thank Patrick for seeing it." Audrey's gaze held hers. "He didn't create my success, Mother. He partnered with it." Vanessa joined a moment later, Mark trailing behind her like a forgotten echo. "Your husband is impressive," Vanessa said. "I see why you married him." "We built this together," Audrey replied. "That's how partnerships work." Vanessa's smile cooled. Of course. Mark didn't speak. But as they stood there, her sister in polite denial, her ex in quiet regret, Audrey realized she didn't want to reclaim anything from them. She had already surpassed it. Hours later, the guests gone, the tables cleared, and the atrium echoing with the hum of late-night cleaning crews, Audrey sat beside Patrick on a bench near the museum's entrance. Between them, a small container of leftover chocolate mousse, 2 wooden spoons. "How do you feel?" he asked, watching her under the soft overhead glow. "Lighter," she said, "like I set something down I didn't even know I was still carrying." He nodded. "They seemed smaller than you imagined." "They are smaller," she said. "Or maybe I'm just bigger. Not in status, not in title, but in self." She held his hand, turned her palm upward to let the bracelet shimmer in the soft light. "I didn't feel triumphant tonight," she admitted. "Not like I thought I would. I felt grateful." Patrick squeezed her hand. "That's the best kind of ending." She smiled. "It's not an ending," she whispered. And it wasn't. As the last guest departed, Audrey whispered, "Now I can finally let go."